Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. As usual, if you aren't already subscribed, please consider doing so. I would greatly appreciate it. And also feel free to leave a comment and or suggestion down below if there's anything you want to see in particular. Okay, so in one of my previous videos, as you can see here, I basically made a video going over how to set up Visual Studio Code for like the more traditional type of Salesforce development, and that kind of being like if your source of truth is still within Salesforce and you write all your code in like the developer console. Basically, this video is geared towards perhaps helping you make the change to using Visual Studio Code, even if you are still in that type of model. And for today, I kind of want to expand upon that a little bit and kind of show you guys how to, well, a couple things, but perhaps one of the more important ones would probably be like how to create test classes in VS Code and how to execute those, and perhaps also how to do the execute anonymous Apex like how you would do the dev console. So let's jump into it. Over here in our Visual Studio Code, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command-Shift-P since I'm on a Mac, or if you're on PC, I'm pretty sure it'd be Control-Shift-P, and we're going to run the command create project with manifest. If this command doesn't really make sense to you, then it might be worth watching my previous video, which I'll leave a link down in the description box below. But just like the previous video, we're going to create a project with the manifest, and we'll just use a standard template, and we'll give this a name. In this case, I will call this test demo. Doesn't really matter the name. And we'll save this just in my desktop. And as you can see here, after the command finished running, we have all our different files. And like I said in the previous video, I kind of explained what a few of these files do and what they're for. Next, what we should probably do is connect to our org. And since I already went ahead and created a connection in my previous video, and if you follow along, which you probably should since it's like the third time I mentioned that video, what you could do is click on the bottom right here and you'll see it says no default org set. If you click on it, we see here a couple different options. Since in the previous video, I already went ahead and connected, we see here that we can now click on this right here. If we click on that, another command runs, and essentially it's just opening up the connection again without us having to type in our password and username. So once we've done that, we've now created a brand new project in our local environment, and we've now connected to the Salesforce org as well. So what I think I'm going to do is let's go ahead and click into Force app and classes right here. And as you can see, it's empty because we haven't actually pulled anything from our org, which is fine. So what I want to do is let's go ahead and create an Apex class from scratch. So as you saw, I right-clicked on classes and I clicked on this create Apex class command right here, which you can also access by using the command palette if you want. But this is kind of I guess a shortcut, not really, but it exists there in case you're curious. And let's go ahead and give this a name. I'm going to call this, let's just call this test demo. Doesn't really matter. We'll use the default directory. And as you can see here, it's now created this class for us. We'll just leave everything as is. That was auto-generated for us. Doesn't really matter for this scenario. So let's go ahead and create a method. And this one will just return something. So like we have something to actually test for in our test class. And I guess I should probably make it clear that this video is not really so much about how to create appropriate or good test classes or test cases. My bad. This video is more about just showing you how to do this within Visual Studio Code. I would probably make more videos in the future going over how to actually create good tests. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. But for now, let's go ahead and create a method, and we'll just call this public, and I'll make it static so I don't have to actually instantiate this class. So we'll say public static, and this will return a string. And let's go ahead and call this get message, like so. It does not accept any arguments. And right here, we'll just return a string message. We'll say hello there, and we'll close it out. Okay, so very simple Apex class, not much to it. Basically just one method that just returns a static string. Okay, so let's go ahead and execute this through the Apex Anonymous window. To do so, in our Explorer tab right here, we can go ahead and go towards scripts and then click into Apex. And you'll see here that there already happens to be a file. This may not be the case for you. I'm not sure. I think this is just like a standard file that exists to kind of show you that is a thing. But if you don't want to use this file here, which You can kind of think of this as like the execute anonymous window. You can pretty much just create your own file if you want. Like as an example, you can say, we'll just call this like window. Make sure you suffix it with .apex, and then you can write your execute anonymous code that you want to execute in here. It doesn't really matter. In our case, I'll go ahead and just delete this because I don't really want an extra file. And we'll just use the one that our project kind of provides for us. And as you can see here, here are some comments that basically show you how you can go ahead and execute that. I'll go over it, so there's no need for me to keep it there. And essentially, since I want to execute in our anonymous console this code right here, what I'll do is I'll basically copy the name of the class because I'm going to reference it in a bit. And let's go ahead and store the output of our get message into a string. So I'll say string, and we'll call this message. And we're going to go to the test demo class, and we're going to call the get message method. And like I said, the reason why I had made this a static method is because I was feeling kind of lazy and I didn't want to instantiate this class to get an object and all that good stuff. And that's not really the point of this video anyways. So just by doing this, we will call this Apex class with this method, or call this method on this Apex class, and we'll store that output in the string message variable. So once we have that, let's actually go ahead and, I guess, console log it out. So we'll do system.debug, and we'll write message, and I'll just write the message variable right there. And to actually execute anonymous, all we have to do, well, there's a few things we can do, or a few ways we can do it. Kind of like the anonymous execute anonymous console within the dev console itself. You have the option of either executing the entire thing or just like a subset of it. And what I mean by that is if you wanted to execute the entire, like let's say there was like more code here somewhere, and I'm not really going to write code, but just pretend these comments are more code. If you just wanted to like, and I believe in the dev console, there are two buttons, right? There's like the execute all and then like the execute selected text only. Well, the equivalent of running the execute all would be by going to the command palette. So Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P, and basically running this command right here, execute anonymous Apex with editor contents. So if we click on that, you'll see here that we have an error actually, and it looks like it says variable does not exist, test demo. And I guess this kind of brings me up to like the first gotcha, which even though we're in our local environment, all these commands, they're technically running and connecting to our org to actually run. So we actually need to deploy this test demo class that we created. So let's go ahead and right click, and we'll just click on deploy source to org. And you can see here the command is running. And after a few seconds, the command successfully ran, and that means that this test demo class is now in our org. So now we should be able to go back to our hello.apex, and we can run the command one more time, execute anonymous Apex with editor contents. So let's go ahead and run that. And as you can see here, now it actually successfully ran. So I did this on purpose just to kind of like make it extremely and I guess painfully obvious that yes, we are in a local environment, but we're still connecting to our org to actually execute a lot of these things that we're doing. So as you can see here, once that execute anonymous ran, we have in this output here a lot of things that should kind of look similar to you guys. You'll see here that the execute anonymous actually ran this code right here. And if we scroll down a little bit, you'll see here we have our debug right here. Message is hello there, which is basically just the output of this debug that we had right here. So a very simple thing, but it's kind of, I think might be important to kind of show all the features that you might already be used to in the developer console, and how you can kind of do the same thing within VS Code. If you're going to make the transition, it might be useful to know all these different things that you can do. So like I said, that kind of covers the execute anonymous Apex. And also, like I said earlier, very important to understand that, yes, we are in our local environment, we're writing Apex code, but in order to, whether it's like run a test class or use the execute anonymous window, you still need to make sure that it's deployed to your org before you can run it. So moving on, let's go ahead and actually create our test class. And I believe before we do the create the test class, there is one setting that we have to enable. So let's go ahead and go to Code, Preferences, Settings, And I believe if you're on PC, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, you'll have to go to File to find that Preferences option. So on Mac, since I'm on Mac, I'll go to Code Preferences Settings. And then in the search box, let's type in Apex. And if we scroll down, you'll see here, this is the last option. And by default, it's unchecked, like a lot of these other settings are. Basically, I believe the reason why it might be unchecked is because I guess running the code coverage and calculating that might take a little bit longer. So to kind of save time, I think it is by default unchecked. So make sure it's checked. That's very important. Once that's checked, you can go ahead and close this settings page. And let's go ahead and create another Apex class. And this one will be for our test class. So let's go ahead and right click, create Apex class. And we'll call this test demo, I guess test. Kind of weird name, but it's fine. Let's click enter and we'll just store that in the default directory. That's fine. And as you can see here, we now have this class that was auto-generated for us. And again, like with the test demo, I'm going to just kind of ignore the fact that it made it public with sharing, and that doesn't really matter for this case. Since this is the test class, we have to specify that it's a test class. So we'll say is test, and we don't really need a constructor, but we will go ahead and create a test method. So we'll say is test static void, and we'll just call this test get message. That's fine. Like so. And as you can see here, as we're kind of writing this code out, like some of these little suggestions pop up. So pretty much, we could just click on run all tests and it should run test after we deploy this class. Or if you want to run a specific method, you could just click on run test as well. So let's go ahead and kind of like how we did in our execute anonymous window right here. Let's actually just go ahead and grab this right here because I'm too lazy to write this out. We'll write this right here. So now we've basically executed the getMessage method on the test demo class, and we stored that output in the message variable. And let's go ahead and do an assertion. So we'll say system.assert equals, and as you can see here, we have auto completion for us. Let's go ahead and choose this one right here. So this one has expected actual and the actual message. And for the expected output should be hello there. And the actual is whatever the message is. And the message parameter or argument, it's kind of nice to have just in case this test class or test method fails. We'll see this output right here. That might help us give us some more clues. So we'll just say get message method contains wrong output or something along those lines. Doesn't really matter for this case. So we'll make sure this is saved. And like I said earlier, we need to ensure that this test demo test class is deployed before we can actually run this test class. So again, we'll right click on the test demo test class and we'll do deploy source to org. The command will run for a bit and then it'll deploy. Once we have that, we have a few different ways of actually running these test cases. As I said earlier, you can either just click on these links right here and it'll execute them. So like I said earlier, we only have one method, so it doesn't really matter if we click run all test or run test. But if I click run all test, you'll see here that the command is running and it's going to take a while because it actually has to deploy it. And it actually looks like we got a failure. And pretty much just from reading the error message here, we can see that the error is pretty much all my fault. I said that the expected is hello there with both the first letters being capitalized, but in the getMessage method, the T is lowercase here. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. We'll make sure that this is lowercase and we'll go ahead and click save. And it is very important that we go ahead and redeploy this class again, or else if we were to run the run test method command again, it would basically be testing against the test class that already exists in the org, and that would be the outdated version of this one. So let's go ahead and get this redeployed to the source or to the org. And once that's done running, we can actually go ahead and click on this button again. And I think instead of clicking on this right here, we can actually go ahead and run the test the other way, which is by clicking on this little icon right here called testing. We can actually get another view of our test as well. And as you can see here, it's kind of sectioned off between Apex test and LWC test, which are Lightning Web Components. We don't have any at the moment, so it's kind of blank. But we can go ahead and click on any of these green buttons right here. Since we only have one test class and one test method, there's not much, there's not going to be any difference between clicking on any of these. So I'll go ahead and just click on the one at top, and you'll see here that it's running the test. It looks like it successfully ran, and we have a passing score of 100% since, you know, our test class is just a one method. There's really not much to it. And you might be thinking to yourself, like, is there a way to see like kind of like the green coverage and like the red not being covered, kind of like how you would see in the dev console? And what I mean by green and red is like there is a way to see like the lines that are covered in green and the lines that are not covered by the test class in red. And yes, you would be right. You can click on this little hamburger at the bottom right here. And by doing so, you'll see that our code kind of gets highlighted in the different colors. And in this case, well, yeah, that test case that we created basically just calls its method. So there's 100% coverage on that. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to go over. We went over how to execute anonymous Apex and run a test class in our Visual Studio Code local environment. And as well as you should now be aware about that caveat, which is basically that even though we're creating our code in our Visual Studio Code, whenever we actually want to execute a Apex class via the Apex anonymous, or we want to run a test class, you have to make sure that the most up-to-date version of your class is in your org, because pretty much what these commands are doing, they're running against your org. It's not like we have, you know, a Salesforce instance in our local environment. That's not really how it works, at least not from what I understand. So it's very important that you understand that little detail. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for now. And I hope you guys enjoyed watching this, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.